Hi again. Okay. So the other chemical agent that we dropped this time was napalm. And napalm was more of a jelly like substance that was dropped from planes too. And the whole purpose of it was to incinerate the jungle and expose any of the Viet Cong that were, hiding in the jungle. But the problem with napalm is it could get on everything. Jelly like, you imagine if you're touching your hands, it's getting everywhere and then it's just spreading and it's burning everything. So while it did a good job with the jungle, it also had a lot of effects on the people. And unfortunately, right now, we're starting to see, especially with our Vietnam vets, some of the effects of things like Agent Orange. My father's good friend, my dad was in he wasn't over in Vietnam, but he was enlisted during Vietnam. He was at the Pentagon, and one of his really good friends that went over just recently died within like a year or two from Agent Orange exposure. And so now we're starting to see that with our Vietnam vets who are getting up in age too, who are in their 60s and 70s. And just that, that inhalation of that stuff that they think that they're, developing lung cancers and things from that because of this. So while it did a good job then, there's always consequences to things like that too when it comes to chemical agents. Another thing that happened during this time period that was really bad PR for the whole war itself and for what was happening is the My Lai massacre, or My Lai massacre, I should say. This massacre, there's nothing good to say about it, okay? It happened in March of 1968. Basically, word got out that there was this little village, My Lai, that was housing supposed Viet Cong. And so we sent in a group to go get rid of them. And when they went through the village, they found no Viet Cong. And people think it was just the stress of the war and just not being able to trust people. But some of the people, Americans that were on the ground, decided that they were going to round up all the civilians that were in the town. It was like 250 civilians, women, children, men even. And they weren't supposed to, hurt them in any way. But as you guys can see, Lieutenant William Calley ordered to shoot them. And, one shot was fired and then multiple shots were fired. And there's a large range of Vietnamese that died that day. We had about 400 civilians die. And it was actually our own helicopter crew, another helicopter crew came over and saw these villagers fleeing for their lives and landed and basically ordered the other American soldiers to stop shooting because they weren't allowed to do that. And word didn't get out about this until a few months after that too. So obviously it put a bad taste in the mouth of many Americans who felt like we shouldn't be there in the first place. We shouldn't be fighting. We were fighting a different war, not for us. It wasn't like they had attacked us necessarily. And, here we are now killing innocent people. And so you can imagine that a lot of people were upset about this. I used to show you guys a video about My Lai too and what happened there. And that all helped to kind of bring about the end of the war. When President Nixon came into office in early 1970s, he decided that he was going to pull our troops out of Vietnam. And so that was something that we did. And as soon as we pulled our troops out of Vietnam, the North Vietnamese took over. So that's why when we talk about Korea today, Korea is still two separate countries, but Vietnam is just one country, and they became one communist country after we left. But this whole creation, like I talked about before, of people not agreeing with what was going on, this created a huge group of people known as the counterculture. And that's where some people want to put the hippies in and stuff. You've heard of that term before. People had sit-ins, teach-ins. People didn't want to support the war here in the United States. And so you had draft dodgers, people that were, drafted, but then didn't show up for the draft for multiple reasons. The music that came out at the 70s, this was a time period of the late 60s, early 70s of a different rock. It was a lot more meaningful. A lot of it's tied to the war and fighting or the purpose of fighting. And this is when Woodstock happened. Woodstock happened in 1969 in New York. A random farm basically is where they decided to host these massive musical event with all these big headliners at the time. But that's kind of how the end of the war de-escalated. We basically just started taking troops just started going home. So that's why some people consider this war a war that we lost, but really we never declared war in the first place. So it can't really be said that we just decided to stop fighting.